Hello everyone, welcome to video number 1. This is Michael from Funding Fulfillment. This is the very first YouTube video that I'm attempting to create. We're going to talk about why tracking your spending beats building a budget. If you're just starting out on your financial journey, I believe building a budget isn't the best advice. Too many people think budget is a dirty word or it scares them, and plenty of people have failed with budgeting in the past, so we're going to discuss that and talk about a better solution that is more effective and higher chance of success. Before we dive into that, just a little background since this is video number 1. The idea here is to try to create a resource that I wish I would have had when I started out. There's plenty of good information for free out on the internet, and I spent many hours and years filtering through it all, finding what works, what doesn't work, and the idea is just to consolidate into one area where all the noise is filtered out. The idea is to not be super flashy in the videos, more of just the conversation. Hopefully the content speaks for itself. If I'm speaking quietly, it's because I have 2 kids upstairs who are taking their naps right now, so there's only so much time I can find to make videos, and nap time is usually one of the only times, so also have to be respectful of the volume. But with that, we're going to dive right into it. I'm not going to give you my whole life story right now. No one wants to hear that anyway. So why is tracking better than budgeting? It all basically comes down to much lower barrier of entry, much easier to start, less upfront work, which creates that higher chance of success that I hinted at earlier. Now we have to define our terms a little bit, because you might be thinking of budget slightly different from what I think people mean when they say you should start with the budget. Budgeting, in my experience, is generally creating a list of all the categories you spend money on, rent, mortgage, utilities, groceries, restaurants, and some of the things are pretty easy to look up. Like typically, I'll guesstimate, $80 on gas per month or $400 on groceries, and you'd probably be pretty close, but you don't know the real actual numbers, like down to the dollar, which can be fine. But the more room for estimating and guessing that you let into your initial budgeting, the more chance for error when you're using that budget for the next couple months, and you find, oh, I'm overspending, and then you start to get a little demotivated, or you feel bad about overspending. It's like, well, maybe you're not actually increasing your spending over what you were doing before. Maybe you just had a bad estimate. So one of the first benefits of tracking is we're collecting the real numbers. There's no guesswork. You'll be able to see, take the last 3 months. Say gas was $60, $80, $92. Just use the average of that until as you collect more data, you can keep building a new average, and you'll find that you can see utilities in the summer is different than utilities in the winter, and you can factor that in, that detail. So we're working with the real numbers, and we're taking out any guessing or estimating. What then happens with budgeting is the list almost becomes a wish list. So if you can't get the amount of savings or debt pay down that you want, a lot of times people will start cutting back categories to unrealistic amounts, but they might subconsciously know it's unrealistic, but they can not lie to themselves, but they can trick themselves into thinking, oh, this is fine, because they don't have the hard, true numbers that they can't argue. Like that's their real past spending. So the data won't lie, sort of thing. So it's not a wish list. You don't have to decide what you're going to spend. You're just tracking what you're already doing, what you've done in the past. And the funny thing about that is when you see the numbers and you start to analyze or recognize some trends, what's going to happen is one or two categories might stand out to you as, oh, I wish I didn't spend that much there. And it'd be, you're going to start altering your spending, altering your behavior based on what you see in your spending tracker. Even if you don't go into it with the idea of like, I'm trying to fix up my budget, once you see the real numbers, you'll adjust whether you think you are trying to or not, because you'll see the results of your spending, and you'll have opinions on it, and those opinions will be in your mind when you go out into the real world and are spending your money. So, yeah, that's really the second benefit is, it still creates change, but you're not trying to create so much change at once that you're setting yourself up for failure, because, you're just trying, with a regular budget, most people try to take on more than they can handle all at once. Maybe the last thing I'll say in this video about tracking is all this data that we're collecting is going to come in really handy for answering bigger questions later. So it's not just a one and done at the beginning. It's not just the first step. When you start to ask questions like, how much do I need to retire? How much do I need to save? Really what you need to know is, well, how much do you like to spend? How much does your current lifestyle cost? There's plenty of trackers that will say, oh, you need about 80% of your last year's salary. It's like, okay, well, if I'm only in my 20s, I don't know what my last year's salary is going to be. Why only 80%? They're basically assuming that you live off of 80% of what your salary is and use the other 20% for savings and debt pay down, which you won't have in retirement, in theory. But if you're someone who only spends half of what they make, say you just got done with college and you have a pretty good job and you're living on your own, the 80% might not work for you, because you might be able to save more than 20%, or maybe you have a lifestyle that's not as expensive, or maybe in retirement you actually want to spend more than you're spending during your working years. Then that number just doesn't work for you. So you need to know how much your lifestyle actually costs. So if you're a $40,000 a year person or $80,000 a year person, you can start to build estimates for your retirement savings off of those numbers. And knowing that you're building off your true numbers will give you a lot more confidence in the estimates later on when answering that question of how much do you need. So how do you start tracking? Really, it's any way where you can collect the real numbers. So I know, like, I have a Discover credit card, and I can log in, it'll give me a pie chart of like, you spent this much at grocery stores, gas stations, that kind of stuff. That's all we're doing. We just want to make sure it's for every account, for every card, across the board. And it just has to be something that's quick and easy enough for you to stick with it. So there's apps that you can pay for, a monthly subscription. Then you link your accounts and it'll collect the data and summarize it for you. When I started out, I did it totally manually. I'd pull up my bank, online banking page of statements, and I'd type in every line into Excel, and it took forever, like a couple hours a month. Don't do it that way. So the app started to look really attractive, but it's way too cheap to pay for them, and I didn't like the idea of syncing my accounts. So what I do now is I create an Excel that I can copy and paste in data from my bank, and it will auto-categorize it for me based on some keyword searches, and it'll auto-sum up each month, and it takes about 10 minutes instead of 2 hours now. I can actually give it away for free on my website. I can put a link in the description if anyone is interested, but really just any method that will get you going and that you'll stick with is all you need. So, and some people, so tracking, or when people say budgeting is the first step, I'm saying tracking is the first step. You might argue, well, I've heard the first thing you should do is get the employer matching your 401k plan if your employer offers it. It's like, yeah, if you want to do that first, I'm not going to argue with you. That's a great step. But at some point, you're going to need to know your numbers, where your money is coming from and where it's going. And the more accurately you can know that, the better off you'll be. Because you'll be able to make decisions, well-informed decisions, not just off of guesses or estimates, or it'll build your confidence in what you're doing in the future. So I think, let me just double check my notes here. First video, gotta make sure I say everything I need to say, right? Oh man. So yeah, maybe the best summary to say is, if I was starting all over, I would focus more on just make it as easy as you can for yourself. No need to create more work than necessary. And that looks different. That's a slightly different for different people. Some people will, that means doing it on paper. Don't want to deal with the technology, that's fine, as long as you get the real numbers. That's all we're going for here. So I'll do more videos in the future on showing my actual tracker, how to use the one that's on my website. If anybody wants to use that, you don't need to. I don't care if you use it or not, but if building Excel templates isn't your thing, it's there for you to use. And obviously, if you have no concerns with the paying for a subscription for, like, you need a budget or every dollar and the privacy of linking accounts and stuff, like, go for that. It's just not for me. So I think we're going to cut this one here before I start rambling too much, and we'll see you in the next video.